Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range to play around with one of my favorite rifles. It actually hangs on the wall in my office, and we were talking about it. Jason and I were talking about it. It's like, we haven't shot that thing in like a decade. So decided to bring it out, do a little bit of shooting with it. I don't even think I've done a video with this rifle, but this is a Shiloh Sharps made in Montana, and it's an exact replica of an 1874 Sharps long-range rifle. And this is a classic American military and civilian rifle. And we'll go into a little bit of the history of the gun. It was originally designed in 1848, but would be used during the American Civil War and after the American Civil War. So let's get started with today's video, shooting this Shiloh Sharps. This one is chambered in 4570, but they are available in all sorts of different chamberings. 4570 is just probably one of the more common chamberings, but for true long-range use, you might want something more like a 4590 or a 45100, or they're just like 45 110s, 120s. They're just all these other cartridges that are quite a bit longer than this that were originally designed for black powder, as was the 4570, but the 4570 made the jump to smokeless powder quite easy, and these are replica loads in terms of using smokeless powder, but not achieving pressures much higher than what black powder would have achieved, just to make sure that a rifle like this would be safe to shoot, although it can shoot modern cartridges. All right. All that being said, let's take a closer look at the Shiloh Sharps and do a little bit of shooting with it, because guys, this is truly a fun rifle to shoot. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. So the Sharps rifle that you see here is a falling block design. So you have a fixed barrel out here. This is your block. Think of it as almost like a big piece of artillery. Your hammer is over on the side, and when you pull down, I should say, on the trigger guard, you'll see that it drops that block, exposing the chamber. It will also eject a cartridge that would be in the chamber at the time that you push that lever down and drop that block. Press a fresh cartridge in there, lift this lever back up, cock the weapon, and then resume firing. Now, what's interesting about this is the rifle, this one's a cartridge rifle, but they weren't always cartridge rifles. In 1848, these rifles were black powder, and they used paper or linen cartridges. And so the block design would be a little bit different, have a knife's edge on it. And with some of the cartridges that were either paper or linen, you would slide the cartridge in, it would have the bullet on the top, it would have the powder wrapped in the linen or paper, and then the rear would just be twisted. And you keep it in a cartridge box. When you put the cartridge in the chamber and lift it up and that block came up, a knife's edge would shave off the rear of the paper, exposing the black powder inside. Then you put a cap on a nipple, and that would cause the flame to go through and ignite the powder, and everything would go down the bore, open up the breech. Nothing would come out because the paper or linen would burn or be pushed out the end of the barrel with the bullet, and you would just stick another cartridge in and resume shooting. But this is one of the few rifles of that era that would make the jump to cartridges very easily. And so they would redesign the block, and it would use a cartridge, and then when you open it up, it would flick the cartridge out, put another one in. And what was funny about this is the rifles were known for their accuracy, even in the early designs. But what was funny about it is the military, some things will never change. So a lot of officers at the time didn't want the troops using a Sharps rifle because it could be loaded too quickly, and they were afraid that the troops would waste ammunition, so they would prefer they muzzle load their rifles. Yeah, I'm not kidding. That's a thing. And we've heard that with modern weapons, machine guns, right? We have semi and full automatic in most military rifles, and generally speaking, the military doesn't want you using it in full auto, except in very specific circumstances. Generally, you want to use semi-automatic, but even then, the concern was when we went from bolt actions to semi-autos that once again, the troops would waste ammo. And of course they do. That's what people do, waste ammo, because it's all too easy to just keep pulling that trigger, especially when the gun loads itself. But these were still known for their accuracy. These would wind up being used by the U.S. military, of course, as I've already mentioned. They would be used by buffalo hunters. They were very popular. Billy Dixon, for example, was a buffalo hunter, and I believe he used a Sharps, and he actually knocked an Indian off his mount at some ridiculously long range, like 1,400 yards or something, using iron sights. And so, these rifles were all over the Wild West. So let's take a little bit closer look at the operation of it, do some shooting with it, talk about the sights, because the sights are really kind of cool on this. As you'll notice, I just folded the sight down and back up. You fold it down for storage, but also this is your elevation and windage. But this is not a standard sight. They were commonly used, these Tang sights, but they were generally shipped originally with just a small little sight like you see here with elevation and range increments. But these were generally considered to be inadequate for extreme long-range shooting and extreme precision shooting, so these would oftentimes just be either removed or left in place, and a Tang sight like this would be installed. But we'll talk a little bit about that too. Plus, the front sight's really interesting. So let's do some shooting with it first. I have it doped for 250 yards. So I'm going to go ahead and take a shot on the target out there. I'm going to explain to you here really quick when I load the weapon how this process goes. So it's already on half cock. So what you have is the hammer here, and this is your firing pin. And when the hammer strikes this, it'll pivot and strike the primer on the cartridge, igniting the cartridge. But it's at half cock. And you want it at half cock when you open the breech, so the hammer's not pushing on the firing pin. And if there's a cartridge in there and it's pushing on the firing pin, it'll drag that firing pin down the back side of the cartridge, and it can damage the firing pin. So you want to make sure, if you can remember, to put it at half cock before you unload or load the weapon. So then you just lay the cartridge in, push it all the way forward, and this is your ejector right there. So when you push the cartridge in, you'll see that little ejector lever go forward. You know it's fully seated. Pull back on the trigger guard, and that closes the breech. And then grab that hammer, pull it all the way back to full cock. Now this one, and not all Sharps would have this feature, but this one has a set trigger. So the back trigger here sets the trigger. So I can fire the weapon right now by pulling on this front trigger, but it's going to be a very heavy trigger pull. I pull this rear set trigger, you'll see this front trigger kind of click and pop. Then that front trigger literally just takes the slightest touch. I don't even know if I can measure it. It's so light. Like you breathe on that front trigger and the weapon will fire. So we'll go ahead and set the trigger here for you really quick. So you just get it on target. I have it out at 250 yards. All right. See, I pulled that set trigger, it clicked. And now I move to the front trigger. And there you go. All right, so then to unload it, pull that hammer back to half cock, get it off the firing pin, flick that lever down. Oops. It'll kick that spent case out. You grab another one and repeat the cycle. Not supposed to hit the sight with the bill of my cover. And that is how you fire the Sharps. Very, very cool. Now let's talk about the sights on this, because the sights are really kind of interesting, and especially the eye cup that I'm using back here, but the front sight has some interesting features as well I think you're going to like. And this is all in the name of making these extremely precise rifles. With the iron sights on this thing, you would be blown away. I've shot groups that are literally same hole groups at 100 yards using iron sights. But you would also find these configured with optics of the time period that would go into the dovetails for the front and rear sight. The optic would mount. It would typically be as long as the barrel, in this case a 30-inch barrel. It would oftentimes be as long as the barrel in the end. The objective side would almost go to the very end, and you would find those being used as well with minimal magnification. But most commonly you would just find them with iron sights like you see here. So let's take a closer look at these iron sights. These are really cool. All right, so let's talk about the tang sight that I have on here. So this would bolt to existing screw holes that would be in the receiver extension that comes back here and attaches the wooden stock to the receiver. Now, you want to make sure when you set this up, it's a time-consuming process because you want to shim this. You got to make sure that this rear sight is perfectly vertical. Because if it's even off a degree or two, as you go up in elevation, the distance increases. If it's canted one way or the other, your shots are going to drift one way or the other. And the further you go out, the more drastic that shift is going to be, even if it's not visibly not centered. So the hardest part in setting this system up is shimming and getting this rear sight set up to where it's perfectly vertical. The other thing, if you take a close look at it, is you have a drum here. And there's little witness marks down here, and you can rotate these drums and it will move this sight left and right for windage. So all the elevation and windage is controlled with the rear tang sight. Then your elevation is adjusted with this knob here. You can see this big long screw that runs up the side here, and then you see all the markings down the side of the sight. And this is called a Hadley cup. There are different types of eye cups. This is a Hadley cup because it has different sized apertures. If you look at the rear here, you'll see different apertures. I can click to go through and pick the aperture that I like. And that will help you, again, fine-tune the rifle to your own use. My face sits a little bit closer because I'm a taller person, so I'll use a different sized hole back here, peep sight, on the rear than somebody that might have their face further back. And then the front sight, and again, the other thing that's interesting is you turn this cup. So you'll see I turn it, that loosens it, and then I can make adjustments to elevation. I turn the eye cup, and that locks everything back down, so the adjustments can't change. Then if I want to store it in a bag, typically there's a little leather thing that I would slide over this, a little leather pouch, and then it would fold back, and that would protect the sight while it was in the bag or in the scabbard on the horseback or whatever, because you do want to protect these sights. If you hit them and bend them, they're relatively fragile. Now you've just kind of screwed things up. That's why I've left this factory sight here, because if I do damage this, I can always fall back to my factory sight. Might not be ideal, but the weapon's not completely useless if I damage the rear sight. Then if you come up here to the front, this is even interesting. So you have this little lever here, and I move this aside, and then inside are these little pieces. You'll see it coming out. That little piece I'm bringing out is not a reticle, but a front sight post. And so you can get different front sight posts. They're just very thin pieces of sheet metal that will drop in there. Then you flip this little lever over, and you can change your front sight post. Like I have a very, very thin front sight post with a slight bead on top that works well for my eyes. And then here you'll notice there's a level, and this is called a spirit level. And as I rotate the rifle, you can see the level move back and forth. So when I'm on the gun and I'm sighting it in, what I'm doing is I'm looking at that front sight, and I could see the spirit level. And so I know when the gun's canted one way or the other, because again, guys, with a weapon like this, especially when using these iron sights, you want to make sure everything is perfectly vertical, because if it's canted even a few degrees, the further distance I go out, I'm going to miss targets completely. So that's why you have little things like spirit levels, and you got to go through the process of leveling this rear sight. It's really, really cool. But once you get it all done, it's an insanely fun weapon to shoot. Now, as I had mentioned, this one has a 30-inch barrel, and it's a full heavy octagon barrel, but you can get them with different barrel profiles, different barrel lengths. You can go shorter, you can go longer than this, and these are custom rifles. So this is a rifle that was made in Montana by the Sharps, the Shiloh Sharps Company, which is the same name as the original founder. Now, in 1848, when the original rifle was designed, that rifle would go on through different evolutionary changes. Eventually, the founder would leave the Sharps Company, and other people would take over production and continue on the name. But it's interesting that the owner would go and start C Sharps and Company, a competitive company. So anyway, and there's also a C Sharps company out there, I think to this day, making US made Sharps rifles. Now, this is 100% US made. It's custom. This isn't something you're just going to go to the website and order. I bought this one in the 90s. And I want to say when I ordered this one, it was a 2 or 3 year wait to get your rifle. They do not mass produce them. They're all handmade. And that is, looking at their website today, that is still the case. Now, if you want one of these, you don't have to spend the money for a true custom rifle like this. You can pick up a Petasoli. Taylor and Company makes them or imports them from Italy. So there are very nice Italian replicas of Sharps rifles out there. They're not inexpensive. They're still going to be $1,500, $2,000, depending on the features and things like that, if it's a cavalry model or a long-range rifle like this. But they are available. They are mass-produced, and generally speaking, you can find them in stock if you're interested in shooting a Sharps. This is more of an heirloom piece. You'll notice it has very fine, fancy wood, the fitment of the butt plate, the wood into the steel. Again, this thing was bought in the 1990s, and it's just been hanging on my wall. You can just see the fit and finish of this rifle is nothing short of just absolutely stunning. And they're just a real treat to shoot. All right, so I've dialed the rear sight back down to its 100-yard zero. Let's go ahead. Just want to make sure it's on half cock here and do a little shooting at 100 yards. Probably don't need the big tall bag for 100. Yeah, I don't need that. Let's grab a couple cartridges here. Drop the seat down all the way. That is just so satisfying. I flick that case out, it throws it right out of the action. Throw another one in. And you have to keep in mind, guys, in the mid-1800s, this was an extremely fast weapon to load and shoot. I mean, guys, it just doesn't get any better than that. This is pure Americana, Old West stuff. You know, the carbines that the U.S. government would use were really good-looking rifles, and all that stuff is still available as a reproduction. I truly enjoy shooting this thing. Now, what's funny, the funny story about this is I bought it. I was into cowboy action shooting in the 1990s. I used to do that quite a bit, pretty much every weekend for a few years there. I wanted to get into long-range shooting, Western style, but I bought this because I wanted to hunt a buffalo. And I bought this as a buffalo rifle. And in 30 years, it's never taken a buffalo. The funny part of the story is I was on a deer hunt several years ago in Oklahoma with a 6.8 modern rifle, an AR-15, 6.8 SPC, and we were hunting deer, and the ranch owner said, I got this old buffalo over here. He's on his last leg. He's going to die if you want. You can just have him. You can shoot him if you want. I wouldn't shoot him because I want to shoot one buffalo, and I want the meat, but I want to shoot it with this rifle. I want to go out west. I want to do it off cross sticks, sitting on a hilltop, just like our forefathers did. And that's what this rifle is for. And hopefully before I die, I'll have that opportunity. Now, if you're going to shoot a classic rifle like this, some of them can handle modern cartridges. You want to talk to the manufacturer before you shoot a high-pressure modern 4570 in a rifle like this. I only shoot what's called trapdoor safe loads, which replicate the pressures of black powder cartridges from the era, and that's just to keep the pressures low so I don't accidentally hurt the rifle. Chances are this thing can handle it. It's modern steel, modern heat treating, but I stick to those trapdoor loads. And this is a company called Steinel. They make all sorts of ammunition for specialty firearms or, you know, perhaps obsolete cartridges. I use them for my Japanese cartridges for their rifles and handguns, like the Nambu cartridges. They make 30-06, you know, grand specific loads. They do all sorts of stuff. So Steinel is an outstanding company, and it's my go-to source for picking up stuff like this. And what you want to look for is something like this on the box, right? There's other different types of manufacturers that make cowboy action loads in 4570 or trapdoor loads, but you'll see that it gives the bullet weight of 405 grains, gives you the velocity here, and it says trapdoor safe. Trapdoors are, I've shown them on the channel before. They are definitely something you don't want to put a super hot modern load into because you can definitely damage them or yourself. Here's another cartridge company. I don't even know if these guys are still around. This is Powder River, but this gives you an example of another 405 grain trapdoor safe load. So if you're looking for those cartridges, look for either cowboy loads or trapdoor safe loads. And again, I can't recommend Steinel enough. So these Sharps rifles, the original Sharps company, would make rifles from about 1848 until about 1881 or so. And that's primarily because cartridges were starting to take off, right? So once the cartridge was developed, uh, the guns started to change. And then things changed yet again when we got into smokeless powder. And that would happen right around the turn of the century, right around 1900 or so. You would start to see smokeless powder starting to take off, things like cordite and stuff like that being used. So old black powder rifles like this were kind of falling by the wayside. Lever actions were faster to use. You could load them up and shoot them very quickly. They would coexist with this for a while, but self-loading rifles and stuff like that, as the cartridges started to become even more popular, would take over, leaving rifles like this in the dust, which is kind of sad because even by 2025 standards, you'd be hard pressed to find a rifle more accurate or capable of better accuracy than this rifle is. It's all basically one big hunk of steel, big heavy barrel fixed to the receiver. There's no barrel whip, no barrel flex, low pressure cartridge. And the 4570 and 4590s and other cartridges, 120s, were known for their accuracy. So it's still a fun rifle to shoot. It's still a very viable hunting rifle. You can even pick these things up and put, 1913 pick rails up here and put a modern optic on it if you were so inclined. The most I might do is put an old brass tubed original style classic optic on here. I think that would be kind of fun, but I also don't want to mar this rifle up or change it. I'd have to get a different rifle. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling. I really do enjoy these rifles. If you haven't had the opportunity to shoot a Sharps or a falling block rifle like this, or an old Remington rolling block, there's so many cool rifles from that era. I would recommend trying to get your hands on one and shooting one. If you know a friend or something like that, or you see somebody at the range shooting one, talk to them. Maybe they'll let you shoot it. I think the bug will bite you because, yes, single shot rifles like this are a lot of fun. The Shiloh Sharps Company, I cannot recommend the quality enough. This has been an impeccable rifle, and over the years, it's just not shown any signs of wear. The wood is high quality. The fit and finish on the metal is just spectacular. So I do think they're worth the money. And what's kind of interesting is the price hasn't skyrocketed on these. When I bought this back in the 1990s, I want to say I paid about $3,000 for it, $3,500. And that's what a base rifle is starting off at, about $2,500, $2,800 to this day. So they haven't jumped up to $5,000, $6,000 rifles. And that's really surprising given the quality that you see here. And that's just me looking at their website just before we started filming this afternoon. I didn't think they were still in business, but that's because they don't mass produce them. If you guys have any questions about this particular rifle, you can ask those questions down below. I do try to stick around for the first couple of days after a video goes live to answer any questions you guys may have. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms channel so we can continue to bring you content like this, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and subscribe button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Hit either one of those buttons and you can help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Thank you for 17 years of support. Swing by, check out Copper Custom, and we will talk to you guys soon.